Hi, my name's QB. Welcome back to another episode of the unscripted, unedited explanation videos for Steal the Skies. We are 3 parts into the crafting tutorials. Basically, going through all of these sheets that I compiled together from the original handbook, source materials, and pulling them together, adding little flares to make them a little bit more fun, a little more interesting. And we're going to continue on with ammo, armor, and weapons. So most of the rules here are the same as in the source material, but I did add a little bit extra flair because I think it'd be more fun if I gave you more options to be able to add more abilities, because in the original, you could only make up to tier 8 weapons and armor. And you could only make one ability per weapon and armor that you create, which didn't really set with me too well that much, so I decided that you can have 3 instead. So, rules. This table, the AAW rules, goes over how to make your ammo, armor, and weapons. First off, with all crafting, when you start out, you want to decide what you want to craft. You would then want to decide once you craft an item, you can either craft an ability with it if you have the special material crafting points for that ability with the spoils to combine there at the start. If you don't, you can add your first ability later, but that will be 2 different skills, so you might as well add it all together at once, unless there's some other reason you'd not want to do that. So, ammo, armor, and weapons cannot have abilities of a higher tier than the base item it is tied to, but they can have abilities that are lower tiered. So you can have a tier 6 weapon that has a tier 6 ability and a tier 4 ability, but it cannot have a tier 8 ability. Armor can only have armor. We'll get into the section, but every ability says whether it's for armors, weapons, or either. Armor can only have armor abilities, and either weapons can only have either and weapon abilities added to them. And also, you cannot have more than one of the same type of ability added to a item. So we're going to quickly go over to make sure that this is clarified. If you were to add a 3 attribute to an item, that is, you are adding 3, let's say, vitality to your chest plate. You cannot then add 3 speed to your chest plate to the same piece of armor. You can add that 3 attribute to a different piece of armor, like your greaves or your helmet, but if you want to go all on attributes, you can only have 1 plus 3 attribute, 1 plus 2 attribute, and 1 plus 1 attribute. This is for scaling, even though the scaling is going to get wacky later on, but also so you can't have like 3 plus 10% HPs. I don't even know how we would calculate that, so we're just not even gonna go there. You can only add 1% per item. All of the crafting points of the basic materials must match the tier of the item you wish to make. So if you want to make let's say a tier 5 crossbow, all of your items have to be of the tier 5 materials. So like moon silver and rosewood. You cannot say that you want to have 1 crafting point of moon silver and then the rest of them just all oak and iron, because that would make things a lot less expensive and a lot cheaper. Also, balancing reasons. Yeah. It will then, if you did try to do that, then it would then become a tier 1 crossbow. The crafting point tier of the special materials for abilities added to items must match the tier of the ability as well. So same thing. I do have a GM sheet that has all of the information of what spoils and what special materials are used for each ability, which will be filled out as the game goes on. The hours required for adding abilities are based off of the tier of the base item you're attaching it to. So for example, if you want to make a tier 2 instrument and add an elemental strike to it, it will be using the 2+ tier, so that would be 4 hours to add the elemental strike onto your instrument. That would also cost 16 hours to make. So that would be, if you want to make them separately, that would be a total of 20 hours to make that weapon. You can reduce 2 hours of the time for adding an ability to an item if it's added during the item's initial construction. So, like that example given, the total time, instead of taking 20 hours, would then take 18 hours. When rolling to see if the item is crafted for the first time, you can add the modifier based on the tier of the base item. So, for example, if you want to make that tier 2 instrument, you just roll one. You roll one skill, that is a 30, with a +30 modifier. If you succeed, fail, that's entirely dependent. Both the ability that you're adding to it and the base weapon are lumped together. But if you do want to do it separately, then it would be 30 for the instrument itself, and since you'd be adding a tier 1 modifier, then a second roll if you do add the modifier at a later time. When you add an ability to the item after the initial creation, you add the modifier for the tier of the ability based off the abilities the item already has. Just explained. Same rules for failures and botches apply for all crafting, but if you botch an ability added after the initial creation, you lose all the CP for the ability, not the item itself. Just the ability that you're trying to add. But you do have to roll again with a... But if you fail the second roll, it will break the item. The item can be repaired. But if you botch the second roll, it will just make it unrepairable. Just broken and unrepairable altogether. After that, there's a whole explanation of the rules on someone that wants to make an item. Goes into the details of how long it takes, what they're trying to make, how many crafting points, and how much skill that will cost. Which I definitely recommend giving a read when you have the chance. After that is rules for ammo. Each successful craft skill check with ammo creates 10 of that ammo. So, and we'll get to that section on the other page. Projectiles have an ability added. Projectiles get one ability that's added to them during creation. Projectiles and ammo can only have one ability total. Projectiles add abilities with touch, strike, damage, critical, drain, kill, sensor, piercing, and accuracy in their name. The tier for the projectile is determined by the ability added during its creation. So instead of having the weapon be the determination for the tier of it, you determine the tier of the ammo based off of the based off of the tier here instead. So if you have ammo that has break damage limit, since damage is in the name, it will then go off of tier 10 rules. Ammo can have one ability tied to them, same rules apply. Crafting new types of weapons, so as we get into the next page, we'll see that there are a lot of different weapons that I have created that aren't in their base rulebook, but every weapon has either a D6, D8, D10, or D12 and damage based off of its size. Every weapon goes off either strength, agility, or magic for its base attribute. Every weapon has 3 slots for abilities, as explained above. Weapon types can have permanent abilities called weapon properties that take up an ability slot. Weapon properties take up the 3rd weapon slot in terms of difficulty and doesn't need to be rolled to craft individually. It just defines the weapon as is. A weapon can have more than one property taking up the 2nd ability slot, meaning that the last one will be the first ability slot is just the number of abilities that weapon can have. Weapons with asterisks and double asterisks next to them have unbalanced abilities that take up that number of slots. So if a weapon has 1 asterisk in its name, then it has its 3rd slot taken up by its property. If it has 2 asterisks, then its property takes up the 1st or the 2nd and the 3rd slots. So properties can be like, it can use ammunition, it has double cut, it has double strike, it has entangle, looping strike, it uses a magic attack instead of physical attack, or it's ranged. So most of the time, D12 weapons will be balanced out by being two-handed, which is kind of a balancing modifier. So you'll see that a bow has 1 asterisk because it is range, which is for it, is two-handed, which is something that's against it, and can use arrows. Since it is not a... Wait, I thought bows were D12s. I'll check that in just a second once I'm done with this video. But we'll see what we can add after that. But if it is just a D10, then that will be the ranged and two-handed cancel out, and the arrows gives it an extra boost, an extra bonus. Down here we have the projectile types, ammos, arrows, and bolts. Ammos for guns and rifles and pistols. Arrows are for bows. Bolts are for crossbows. New weapons down below, we have hand bombs, measures, buzzsaws, scythes, pistols, and whip swords. Also need to make bucks and gun blades at some point if people are interested. If not, then I might not ever get to them. We'll see. And this whole section, so when you are creating weapons and ammo, and armor, there's the item itself that you're making, the skill that is required to make them, the amount of crafting points, and the amount of time hours that it takes to make them. So the crafting points, there is a total amount of crafting points, and then it's broken down into how many crafting points of metal, how many crafting points of cloth, and how many crafting points of wood you need. And so that is, and so the cost will be entirely dependent on how many of each of those that you are able to procure of the tier that you are trying to make. So if you want to make a tier 5 flail, you will need 9 tier 5 metal crafting points and 9 tier 5 wood crafting points. Next, we'll determine how long it will take. So it would be 8 plus 4.5 times 5 hours, which I don't have a calculator on me on hand, but it is that many number of hours. Let's go up one to make sure that we can do that. Crossbows. That would take 28 hours to make a crossbow, as long as you have 15 tier 5 wood crafting points and 1 tier 5 metal crafting points. Same rules apply for ammo, arrows, and bolts. They're a little bit more simple. And same thing for the new weapons that were created. Abilities themselves, you have the abilities. They attach themselves to the weapon itself. Once you have it attached to the weapon, it can't really come off, but you can always get more materials for that. The tier itself, that determines how much of the crafting points of materials that you need, or that determines what tier of crafting points that you need. We already went over armor, weapons, and either for what these can be added to. And the amount of hours is the same as before. Is calculated the same as over here. Like I said on the last page, these tier sections are based off of the tier of the base weapon. A fun thing with abilities is that there's also their own table for measure abilities, because measures are weird and funky. They, once you hit target with them, actually give a bonus, a positive effect, such as hear or speed or protect. So you do a little bit of damage, and then they have protect on whenever you hit them. Same applies for tier, crafting points, what their attitude, and hours, same as before. This table over here is the modifier for the tier of the ability that you're adding to a weapon. So this is entirely dependent on the ability itself and how many abilities are already on the weapon. So if you want to make if you make like a tier 10 sword and you give it like 3 10-tier abilities, you can have your first roll when you're making the sword itself, give it a negative 50 modifier, and then you all give it a second 10-tier ability. That's going to be significantly more tough. You're going to have a negative 70 modifier. And if you want to give it a third 10-tier ability, which is going to make that sword very powerful, if you succeed, that'll be a negative 90 modifier. To be able to add that third tier 10 ability. After that, this section over here goes over the weapon damage scale for the tiers. So this determines what the damage scale for D6 weapons, D8 weapons, D10 weapons, and D12 weapons. Meanwhile, you have the armor, magic armor, evasion, and magic evasion that you can add based off of the shield tier that you're making, the mail tier, robe tier, suits, hats, helmets, arm wear, and gauntlets. So this is and you can add those to and once you have all of these together, you can start crafting whatever weapons and armor and anything that you want. So yeah, I think that's everything for adventuring gear that you'll be needing. Next up, we have inventions and mixes, which probably be shorter than these last 3 videos, and probably only going to be useful if you, and by probably I mean will only be useful if you plan on taking the chemist mixing or the engineer invention abilities. So that's me. I'm QB. This has been learning more about Steal the Skies stuff. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.